And then there's Tucker Carlson. So Tucker took the stage at TPUSA, and essentially he made the same claim, but he didn't have the courage of his convictions because he's not willing to say what he's saying. Again, there are only two possibilities here. Either Pam Bondi screwed up the rollout of this particular case, and she oversold what was there, and then she had to walk it back, but she won't publicly walk it back. Or the president of the United States, the vice president of the United States, the head of the FBI, the deputy director of the FBI, and the head of the DOJ are all complicit in a child rape cover-up. Those are the only two choices. There is no third choice. Well, here is Tucker Carlson saying what Dave Smith is saying, but without the courage of his convictions to just say Trump is the one doing the covering it up. And I would love for him to say it publicly. Seriously, he knows the president. He's friendly with the president. He's obviously incredibly friendly with the vice president of the United States, for whom his son is press secretary. So anytime he wants, he could call up the administration and seek clarification on whether they are in fact covering up child rape. And I would love to know whether he has done that, since he is very close with those people. But here is Tucker making the accusation without having balls to actually say it.
But the fact that the U.S. government, the one that I voted for, refused to take my question seriously and instead said, case closed, shut up, conspiracy theorist, was too much for me. And I don't think the rest of us should be satisfied with that.
Okay, so ask the president. So ask him. Seriously, you got his phone number. We know the president talks to Tucker. We know that J.D. Vance frequently talks to Tucker. Ask the question. Seriously. Do it. One of the things you'll notice about Tucker, he's very good at sort of speculating about problems without offering any solutions or trying to solve them. So if he really believes, when he says the U.S. government is covering up the conspiracy, who is the U.S. government at this point? Who is the U.S. government? Really, who is it? Name the people. When we're talking about Joe Biden, we can name the people. Jill, Hunter, Jake Sullivan, his domestic policy advisors. We can name the individuals, not some sort of broad category of the U.S. government. If he wants to accuse Donald Trump of being complicit in a child rape gang cover-up, then he should just say his name. He should just do it. And why won't he? I think we all know the answer to why won't he. Here is Tucker then asserting that it was actually Mossad. Again, without evidence, not a shock. Of course, this is where Tucker was going. This has become the hot speculation on the internet, is without evidence. You say that Mossad was running Jeffrey Epstein. When I say without evidence, I mean without evidence. Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli prime minister, said, quote, "As a former Israeli prime minister, with the Mossad having reported directly to me, I say to you with 100% certainty, the accusation that Jeffrey Epstein somehow worked for Israel or the Mossad running a blackmail ring is categorically and totally false. This accusation is a lie being peddled by prominent online personalities such as Tucker Carlson, pretending they know things they don't." And in fact, I followed up with the former prime minister, Naftali Bennett, and what he told me is that Mossad has not been active in the United States against the United States since the Jonathan Pollard scandal of 1987, when a U.S. Army contractor who's actually working for the Navy revealed classified information to the Israeli government. He was prosecuted by the United States government and ended up in prison for almost 30 years. And so Israel since then has not spied on the United States with Mossad. But in any case, even if you don't believe Naftali Bennett, that's fine. The United States government says this isn't true. Okay, Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and J.D. Vance and the president of the United States say this is not true. But Tucker is going to throw it out there as though he knows something. And so all I would ask is, okay, if you're so certain, show me the evidence. I'm asking him the same thing that I'm asking Pam Bondi. Show me the evidence or lack thereof. Right? That's how you answer questions. If you're going to ask a question, you have to demand an answer to that question. Otherwise, you're not asking a question. You're positing a theory without any evidence and calling it a question because you stick a question mark at the end of it. Did you rape your dog? Did you rape your family dog? And then no matter what anyone says, well, you probably did. You know what? I know you did. I know 100% you did. And that's not just asking questions. That would be positing a theory, a specious and terrible theory without evidence. Here is Tucker doing just that.
And moreover, it's extremely obvious to anyone who watches that this guy had direct connections to a foreign government. Now, no one's allowed to say that that foreign government is Israel because we have been somehow cowed into thinking that that's naughty. There is nothing wrong with saying that. There is nothing hateful about saying that. There's nothing anti-Semitic about saying that. There's nothing even anti-Israel about saying that.
Okay, well, I mean, if you have evidence, that's true. If you have no evidence and you're just throwing that out there, then it starts to look at the very least non-journalistic and not truth-bearing. He continued to double down on this, of course. And again, remember, in the end, this is not really about Mossad. In the end, what this is really about for Tucker Carlson is who's covering it up. It wasn't Israel that was prosecuting Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein's an American citizen. It was the United States government that was prosecuting Jeffrey Epstein. So again, if Tucker would just like to say that the Trump administration is actively covering up a sex grooming ring, a child sex trafficking ring on behalf of a foreign government, why doesn't he say President Trump's name or J.D. Vance's name or Kash Patel's name or Dan Bongino's name or Pam Bondi's name? He knows all those names. He knows all those people. Here he was with Charlie Kirk on stage.
The real scandal here is who he was working for and where the money came from. That's the actual scandal. And no one will say anything about it because the answer...
Was it American intelligence?
No.
Was it Saudi intelligence? Was it British intelligence?
It was Israeli intelligence. And everyone's embarrassed to say that because you're not allowed to say that or something because you're a hater, but you're not a hater at all.
Not a hater at all when you just throw out theories without any evidence whatsoever. And by the way, again, avoiding the chief point, which is, let's assume that Tucker's right. Let's assume that it was Mossad. Okay, that means the United States government is complicit on behalf of Mossad in a child rape scandal. Who is the United States government? Donald J. Trump. So, Tucker, just say it. Just say it. Weird you won't. Strange. Almost cowardly, actually. And then he doubled down again with another TPUSA personality named Alex Clark.
Do you agree with Candace Owens that the reason we are not going to see the client list is because Israel is implicated?
Israel is implicated. I'm just going to say that. I mean, the former prime minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, lived at Epstein's townhouse on and off for years. And so, absolutely.
Okay, so the fact that Ehud Barak, who is a complete scuzzbag, Ehud Barak is terrible. He's awful. The fact that he was involved with Epstein no more implicates Mossad than the fact that a huge number of prominent people in the United States were involved with Epstein implicates the CIA or President Trump. President Trump knew Jeffrey Epstein. So if you want to make that claim, just make it. But I noticed again, you're not. Okay, this, of course, culminated in Tucker suggesting that I don't even want to ask the questions. Again, I'm fine with whatever questions you want to ask as long as you demand actual evidence for the answers. If you ask a question and then any evidence provided is dismissed in favor of your favorite pet theory, you're not seeking answers. You are positing a theory. That's all.
Anybody who asks obvious questions like, hey, were you running a sexual blackmail scheme in my country? Shut up, says Ben Shapiro, you're an anti-Semite. Well, no, I'm not. Why is it not a fair question? There's tons of evidence this is happening. Like, are you joking? You're not going to shout me down, by the way, at this point. I spent 4 years being shouted down by the left for asking, I thought, pretty reasonable questions. I have always felt very moderate. I'm not a hater at all. And I'm not going to become one. And I don't think my questions are insane. They may be stupid. But if they're stupid, then just speak slowly so I can understand as you answer them.
Okay, here it is, slowly. If you are asking a question, but demanding no answer to that question, and any evidence that contradicts your pet theory is dismissed, you are not asking a question. You are positing a theory of your own, but don't have the balls to say the thing you want to say, which is that Donald J. Trump, the president of the United States, is in fact covering up a child rape ring. That's as slowly as I've ever talked on the show, and slower than I will ever talk again. That is the thing that I am saying. And by the way, I've never called Tucker Carlson an anti-Semite. I actually haven't. Go back, look through the record. It's never a thing that's happened. He's throwing that out there as a red herring to the fact that he is saying things that he does not have the capacity to back up, period. And this is all part, again, of a sort of broader demoralization effort that is happening on parts of the right. Okay, President Trump is right about this. When President Trump says there have been an enormous number of wins under his administration, that is true. There are an enormous number of wins under President Trump's administration. That's just a fact. But there are a number of people, particularly Tucker, who make a living off of suggesting that there is nothing whatsoever that you can do to actually fix the country, fix your life, or make things better. When it comes to getting things done quickly, we've all learned not to expect perfection. Think about it. You don't pull up to a fast food drive-thru and expect to receive a gourmet meal in a paper bag. It's become almost a given that speed and quality exist on opposite ends of the spectrum, forcing us to choose one or the other. Well, there's an exception to this unwritten rule. If you're hiring, can find candidates fast who are also extremely qualified for your job. Just use ZipRecruiter. Right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ziprecruiter.com/dailywire. ZipRecruiter's advanced resume database lets you proactively find and connect with qualified candidates in just minutes, so you won't be stuck waiting around. When you spot a standout candidate, you can unlock their contact information instantly and reach out right away. With 320,000 new resumes added every single month, you'll have access to a constantly growing pool of potential hires, and that means you can fill your open roles much faster. Here at the Daily Wire, we are always looking for top talent. Having the great features ZipRecruiter offers would make hiring a breeze for any business owner, big or small. Experience hiring speed and quality with ZipRecruiter. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within day one. And if you head on over to ziprecruiter.com/dailywire right now, you can try it for free. Again, that's ziprecruiter.com/dailywire. ZipRecruiter is the smartest way to hire. So here's Tucker Carlson suggesting that President Trump's wins on Title IX, defending girls from boys in sports, and shutting down the transing of the kids on a federal level. Here's Tucker suggesting that that's totally meaningless. And then moving on to a series of problems for, again, which he will not name an actual solution because he's not interested in solutions. He's interested only in running down the United States, most prominently, including even when President Trump is the president of the United States.
If you deny people what they actually want long enough and instead substitute things that you claim they should want, like bombing Iran, I'm not for Iran, where you spend all day telling me that it's so important that, boys not playing girls' soccer teams or whatever. I agree. I hate the tranny stuff passionately. I think you should keep the boys off girls' soccer teams. But I don't know. It kind of feels like you're feeding me appetizers. At some point, I want to look around and see a better country. I want to see a country I recognize. I don't want to see people sleeping on the sidewalk. I don't see people ODing on drugs. I want to know where those drugs coming from. Why can't you stop it? You've got the U.S. military. Don't you have SEAL Team 6? What are they doing today? Don't you have Delta Force? You could give me another segment about how impressive the U.S. military is? I believe you. Why aren't they employed to make my country better? Why are my cities disgusting? I don't even want to go there. It smells like weed and halal food. And you're lecturing me about how it's a great moral victory that I kicked the boys off the girls' soccer team? Good, I'm so glad. But let's do the real stuff, like making New York livable.
Okay, so we can stop there. What is the real stuff he's talking about? Seriously, what is the real stuff? And who's the president of the United States whose name he will not mention? For some reason, he treats the president of the United States. He sort of treats him as though he is Voldemort. If you say his name, he will appear. But all the things he's saying right here are condemning the president of the United States. Let's just be very clear about this. When he says that people are being distracted by bombing Iran, who's the one who bombed Iran? The president of the United States. When he says it's a distraction to get the boys out of the girls' sports, which is not a distraction, it is a major issue in the United States that we ended the trans threat to truth and reality. When he says that, who did that? That was Donald J. Trump. And then he says he's feeding appetizers. But he wants a country, he says, where people aren't sleeping on the sidewalks, which, by the way, is typically a local and state issue, where people aren't ODing on drugs. And then he says, why can't you stop it? You've got the U.S. military. Don't you have SEAL Team 6? I have a question. Is Tucker in favor of using SEAL Team 6 to go after the Mexican drug cartels? I kind of am. So I would love to know if Tucker is in favor of an interventionist conflict in Mexico in order to take out the Mexican drug cartels. Really? Is he? If so, he should probably spell it out. But notice there's never a solution. He doesn't even have anybody on to discuss these problems on his show. He will never talk about how to solve the problems. This is why I say it's about demoralization. It's about making you feel about the country. Because there is never a solution emerging from Tucker Carlson. I'll give this to Zoran Mamdani, who I think is one of the worst people in American political history. His solutions are absolute trash garbage. But at least he's offering some. Tucker goes out there and doesn't offer any solutions at all. Instead, Tucker goes out there and posits that everything is wrong in the world. Every victory is, in fact, an appetizer or a loss. In fact, he says, elites are using Iran as a distraction while they steal our money. I have a question. Who bombed Iran? Why don't you say his name? Say it. I dare you. I triple dog dare you. The president of the United States is the one who pulled the trigger on the Iran attack, the most successful single foreign policy move of my lifetime. Tucker Carlson said it would lead to World War III, catastrophic loss of American life. All of that was absolutely wrong, and not just wrong, but yes, dumb, because it was based in specious information. But he won't say the president's name. Here we go.
How about just a middle-class life? Can they get married young, as I did, and have 4 kids and, take a couple jobs, work hard and all that stuff? But in the end, it's like, fine, can they do that? Or is that like so remote a possibility that you need to tell me that Iran is the real threat, take my mind off the fact that you stole the money and screwed up my country beyond recognition?
Oh, stole all your money and screwed up. Iran is, who is he talking about there? The president of the United States is the one who authorized the strike on Iran. Did he steal your money and screw up your country beyond recognition? Who was it exactly? He uses a lot of they language, I noticed, without specifying who it is that we are talking about here, Tucker Carlson. And can we be real about the economics for a second? The reason that the middle class has declined in the United States is because the upper middle class has grown by leaps and bounds. That is the actual reality. The share of adults who live in middle class households has changed. The share of adults who live in upper income households has picked that up. That is the reality of change in economics over time in the United States. In the United States, in 1970, according to the Census Bureau, 43% of Americans were in the top 20% by income group. 42% were in the middle 40 by income group. By 2013, 51% of Americans were in the top 20%, 37% were in the middle 40%, and only 12% were in the bottom 40% in terms of income. So, in other words, this idea that the middle class can't get ahead, and when Tucker Carlson does this, I'm just standing up for the poor middle class routine. I'd just like to point out that Tucker Carlson grew up silver spoon. Whenever he talks about, will his kids be able to grow up in America? Well, I mean, his son is the press secretary for the vice president of the United States, so I feel like his kids are going to be okay. The running down of America, while the party that he supposedly backs is in power, doing things that conservatives like, is pretty astonishing, actually. Tucker would then go on to just mirror the language of Alexander Ocasio-Cortez and the rest of the Democratic Socialists of America, going after Bill Ackman, who he says was in league with Jeffrey Epstein now.
How do you know they're getting away with scams? I'll tell you how, because they're useless and they're rich. So how do you come to a place where some of the least impressive, most useless people who have no actual skills become billionaires? How's that legitimate? And by the way, if you ask this question, at least in Washington, it's like, oh, well, yeah, it sounds like you're a socialist. Sounds like socialism. Yeah, okay, I'm a socialist now. All right. I was a Qatari agent or a bigot. Now I'm a socialist. All right. Leaving aside my committed socialism, can you answer the question? How did Bill Ackman get $9 billion? Bill Ackman, a pretty impressive guy? I know Bill Ackman. No.
Okay, so first of all, Tucker Carlson's judgment as to who is an impressive guy seems flawed, considering that he believes Vladimir Putin, the prime minister of Qatar, and the president of Iran seem to all be very impressive guys, at least in his estimation. Tucker Carlson, when he says, I'm not a socialist, and he sort of just dismisses that out of hand. Okay, that's fine. I'm not calling you a socialist. I'm just saying that the things you're saying line up perfectly with Alexander Ocasio-Cortez. The way that Bill Ackman made his money is through investment. In fact, Bill Ackman put out a long thread yesterday explaining precisely how he made his money. By the way, I love when Tucker says things like, well, he has no actual skill set. Let's be real about this. Tucker's in the same business that I'm in. Okay, Tucker has a skill set. Tucker's skill set is that he's incredibly articulate, he's quite brilliant, and he knows precisely what he is doing in order to get an audience. And that's a skill set, and he has monetized that skill set. How many jobs has Tucker Carlson created? I would wager to say significantly fewer than Bill Ackman in the United States. Why? Because Bill Ackman has created enormous amounts of economic activity through investment. So he put out a long post yesterday, Bill Ackman did, responding to Tucker. Quote, Tucker Carlson went on a rant yesterday at TPUSA and suggested that I was in Jeffrey Epstein's constellation of people who have been getting away with scams. His evidence is that the most useless people have no actual skills becoming billionaires. He referred to me as an example of one of the most useless billionaires in Jeffrey Epstein's constellation. In order to address Tucker's defamatory statements, I thought it would be useful to share a few facts. I never met Jeffrey Epstein, flew on his planes, went to any of his parties and or properties, or interacted with him ever. When my wife was a professor at MIT, she received a $125,000 grant from Epstein prior to my knowing of her existence. She met Epstein once for 45 minutes at the request of the head of the MIT Media Lab, made a presentation about her work, and later got a grant. That was the last time she ever met or spoke to Jeffrey Epstein. If this is why Tucker thinks I am in Jeffrey Epstein's constellation, it's clear he doesn't know anything about astronomy. With respect to how I generated a net worth of more than $9 billion, I share the following. I inherited good genes from wonderful parents who instilled good values in me. I never received an allowance, so I worked odd jobs washing and waxing cars, digging ditches, lawn and tree care, etc. for pocket money beginning when I was about 10. My parents gave me a huge head start by paying for my education, including college and business school. I paid for my housing and expenses, and they paid for my tuition. I worked through college selling advertising for the Let's Go Harvard student travel guides. I learned a lot about sales working in the basement of a dorm, smiling and dialing small hostels, hotels, and car rental companies around the world selling ads to strangers. After college, says Bill Ackman, I went to work for my dad's real estate mortgage brokerage company. I received a $40,000 draw and generated more than $600,000 in commissions in 18 months, making me one of the largest, if not the largest producer during my short term there. I received only 15% of the commissions I generated, which contributed to my choosing to pursue an alternative career as an investor, and went to business school to learn more about investing. When I graduated from business school, my parents gave me $100,000 in a settler trust. My dad said I would never inherit anything more, as he wanted me to make it on my own. The funds never left the trust, and I don't include them in my net worth. My good economic fortune comes largely from compounding, that is, investing over the long term and building a successful investment business. And then he goes on to talk about how exactly he did this and how he launched Pershing Square due to backing from Joe Steinberg and Ian Cumming of Leucadia National Corporation, which in 2013 merged with another company. And he talks about how he met him and how he invests. And he says, my net worth today comes from three principal assets. One, my initial investment in the Pershing Square funds has increased 56 times since Pershing Square's inception due to compounding. I also increased my investment in the Pershing Square funds over time by reinvesting incentive fees net of taxes that I earned from our investors. And in 2017, during a rough patch, I doubled down by borrowing $300 million and investing more. My investment in the Pershing Square funds today is worth about $2.5 billion. Two, the management company, which employs me and the rest of Pershing Square, has become a very profitable business over time. I started Pershing Square with de minimis capital. We sold a 10% interest in the business last year to strategic investors at a $9.5 billion pre-money valuation. I own about half of Pershing Square Management Company, the value of which grows as we compound the value of the funds we manage. My interest in Pershing Square Management Company is worth about $6.5 billion today. He says, while Tucker may believe investment management is a useless activity, I expect our investors would say otherwise. Pershing Square has generated one of the best investment track records of any investment firm over the last 21 and a half years, generating 2.9 times the return of the S&P 500 over the same period net of all fees and expenses. We've been an active and engaged investor since we launched and have played a major role in turning around poorly managed, troubled, and or bankrupt companies, with Canadian Pacific, Chipotle, and General Growth being good examples of this activity. Okay, so again, pretty amazing stuff. You know, the fact that Tucker seems so overwhelmingly unhappy with the United States as run by Donald J. Trump and his administration is pretty astonishing. Of course, his animus doesn't stop there. He also went after Fox News, suggesting that Fox News is anti-Christian, which again is a very, very wild contention, that Fox News is anti-Christian. Fox News literally will pray in the name of Jesus on the air. But apparently, according to Tucker, they're anti-Christian. Why? Well, we'll let him tell another TP USA personality.
She thought they were really anti-Christian.
Oh,
Fox.
really?
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Why do you say that?
It just makes them uncomfortable. They're not comfortable with that at all. If you said on Fox, which I don't think I ever did, I probably should have, but like, hey, how are the Christians of the West Bank doing? Like, how's Bethlehem doing, where Jesus was born? The church and the nativity. It's got to be. That's not the most sacred site in Christendom. I'm not sure. What is Jesus was born in Bethlehem? It's the church of the nativity. Let's call the rector of the church of the nativity and ask him what he thinks of Israeli occupation. Just as a Christian, I think it's totally fair. Whoa. I mean, you'd be out of there.
Okay, so notice that the example that he uses as to Fox being anti-Christian is actually him being anti-Israel. Okay, maybe the reason that Fox was not happy with Tucker, if Tucker would have tried to do that, is because what Tucker means by that is that he would have called up the Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac, who actually had on his show a few months back, I think last year, and allowed him to just spout nonsense about the Israeli occupation. Okay, Dr. Munther Isaac, who was on Tucker's show and who didn't fact check for one single solitary second, operates within the Palestinian Authority and in coordination with the Palestinian Authority, the terrorist group that governs the West Bank that he's talking about, and that governs Bethlehem. That particular person portrays Jesus as, quote, a Palestinian under occupation. He refers to Israel as an apartheid state. He holds a Christ at the Checkpoint conference, routinely featuring speakers who refer to Israel as illegitimate. Okay, none of this has to do with Christianity. He had nothing to say of substance about October 7th and said, quote, the biblical basis for Christian Zionism is as strong as the biblical basis for justifying, defending, and endorsing a genocide. It is this simple about Christian Zionism. Again, I'm using Munther Isaac as the example of what Tucker's talking about, since Tucker had him on his program. At no point was it mentioned in that interview that Bethlehem was a majority Christian city in the early 20th century, and then as Muslim Arabs crowded in, it was reduced to a small minority. Nor is it mentioned in that interview that in April and May of 2002, during the Second Intifada, Palestinian Authority-linked terrorists, including Fatah terrorists, used the Church of the Nativity as a refuge after committing a full-scale terrorist attack and fired shots from it at Israeli troops. Okay, at no point does Tucker talk about any of that. He's never talked about the fact that Hamas imposed strict Sharia law in the Gaza Strip, reducing the Christian population to effectively near zero. He's never mentioned the fact that land seizures by Muslims in Bethlehem are actually quite common, and that in interpersonal disputes, the PA actually, supposedly being a secular law body, imposes Sharia law in many interpersonal disputes, delegitimizing Christians. Again, maybe that's, but the idea that Fox News is anti-Christian is such an absurdity on its face. But again, in the end, what is all of this about? What is all this about? Well, I don't know what the motive is. I'm not going to attribute motives. What I am going to say is it's demoralizing. It's demoralizing. Every Trump victory is apparently nothing. Not only that, perhaps Trump is engaging in a sex ring cover-up, but he won't say it. So here's my final point about the Epstein of it. As I've said at this point, maybe 1,000 times, Pam Bondi should do a full-scale press conference revealing everything she knew, everything she doesn't know, when she knew it, what the evidence is, and all the rest. That's where transparency is good. Baseless conspiracy theorizing based on no evidence, said with great certainty, is not in fact a question. It is a theory you are positing. And if you refuse to have that theory falsified in every way, it's not a theory anymore. It's a religious belief. Beyond that, if you're going to accuse the Trump administration of an active cover-up of a child rape ring, you should just say it. Honestly, if you're going to be, again, I will name check Dave Smith because he was brave enough to just say it. If Tucker believes the same thing as Dave Smith, he should just say it as well. Otherwise, he's not telling the truth to his audience, and he is hiding the ball. Well, that's all for now, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts down below. Be sure to check out all of the other great content on my channel. I'll see you here next time.